Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Baharakah, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the Lord's elect. All right, the real Hebrew Israelites are us so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. All right, we're the Most High's chosen people, okay, above all these nations on the earth. And the so-called white man is Esau, Edom. He's the nation of the Edomites, who is labeled as the wicked in the scriptures. So we're living in the last days where, this man is currently in power, but his empire and his establishments are going down. All right. And that's what we're currently witnessing. All right. His stub hub, is America, which America is Babylon the Great in the scriptures, marching towards a nuclear destruction. All right. And during that time, only an elect remnant will be saved. All right. So we are in the time of war on all fronts. All right. So what I'm getting into in this lesson is, this will be a quick lesson. Lord's will is edifying, is the civil war that's getting ready to go down here in America. All right. Because we know there's going to be global war, which is World War III, the War of Armageddon. All right. But there will also be a civil war. All right. Complete anarchy here in these states. All right. So this is a warning to all, that we're approaching these days, and all these prophecies will be going on at the same time. All right. War, pestilence, which is diseases, plagues, sicknesses. All right. Famine. OK, so this is a warning. Before I get into this article, let me get this precept in Jeremiah 28 and verse 8. The prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. So here we are in the last days. All right. We are in the last days where these things are here. All right. War, evil, and pestilence. All right. Evil means bad times. And what are the bad times that we are approaching? Great famine like never before. OK, and many other things, sedition. All right. This whole way of living that we're all, accustomed to, that these people don't know anything outside of, is getting ready to come to a halt. All right. And this devil, the so-called white man, in particular, the central bankers, are preparing the world for a new system, a digital system under the RFID chip, which is the mark of the beast. All right. But, they have that motto, order out of chaos, but they're not going to be able to control what's coming, because what's coming ultimately is the prophecy of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, which concludes with the end of, of what they got going on, the end of their power, because Yahweh Shai is coming at the end of all this to establish the kingdom of heaven on this planet. So speaking of, since the topic at hand is war, and in particular civil war, let's get Matthew 24, Yahweh Shai's prophecy of the last days and his second coming. Verse 6, it reads, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Right. Wars and rumors, or reports of wars. OK, and we've had a World War I, World War II, proxy wars. All right. Skirmishes in between, right now you have a lot of, tension going on in the earth, between those small hats, those Edomites over there in our land, and, the Palestinians and Hamas, and different other countries out there in that region that are opposed to them, like Yemen and Lebanon. All right. You have Russia and Ukraine. All right. You have China getting ready to take Taiwan. OK. And then you always have the threat of nuclear war. All right. These nations moving military equipment from one place to another, testing missiles out, constantly advancing their nuclear capability. All right. Weak nations being made strong through finance, by different nations. All right. And the promise of protection. All right. So the drums of war are beaten heavy right now. OK, it says, see that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Why? Why is the end not yet? Because there's much more that has to happen. All right. And we're in the end, but the end here meaning like the very, very end, where Yahawashi comes. Before Yahawashi comes and America is destroyed, there's still prophecies that have to take place. All right. The Civil War here in America, which that's the topic we're going into. All right. Great famine, the peak of Jacob's trouble. Right. And, of course, the major prophecy, the mark of the beast being made mandatory, which these things aren't far down the pipe. All right. In all actuality, these things could happen within a week. All right. When you think about it, within days, this devil could set up some type of black swan event, false flag, all that takes is a day. All right. To act out something like that. All right. Terrorist attacks, for the economy to completely collapse and crash, and for them to issue in that microchip and say, you know what, this is the only way we could get our economy and society back to normal. All right. So we're very close. Verse 7, it says, for nation shall rise against nation. And what is that? Race wars. OK. And kingdom against kingdom. These different countries going at it. World War III. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. All right. So that's where we're currently at right now. OK. And this article that I had on the screen right here, it says 1,500 or 1,500 soldiers on standby for possible Minnesota deployment, source says, as state mobilizes National Guard. All right. And we all know what's going on in Minnesota, in particular, Minneapolis. OK. What was it, like a week or two ago? You had that Edomite lady, get shot in the head and killed by an ICE agent, whether it was a psyop, or not, whatever the reaction and the results are real, where you have these people, whether they're paid to go do what they're doing or whatever, it doesn't matter. The reaction is real. But you have these citizens of Minneapolis and Minnesota, going out and protesting, and getting face to face with federal troops, and there has been more violence that has spiraled out, since then, to the point where they're talking about mobilizing 1,500 soldiers. OK, so order out of chaos is clearly being set up. This devil creates these fake events that seems real to get emotional reactions out of people so they could go out and do stuff like this. All right. And then if he doesn't get the reaction he wants, he'll pay groups, he'll fund groups to go out and protest and riot. All right. So that he could say things are getting out of control. We need to come down harder. We need to set the Insurrection Act, martial law. All right. But all of this is according to prophecy anyway. OK, so it's going to get a whole lot worse, but not even just in Minnesota, all over this country, to the point of civil war. All right. So we don't got to go into this article. We all know what's going on. Let's just grab the scriptures before I get Isaiah 19. Let's go to 2 Ezra 15. So 2 Ezra 15 in the Apocrypha, let's jump all the way down to verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. All right. The modern day sword is a gun. All right. And you have people, getting on these podcasts and, different news media interviews talking, all type of crazy stuff, how they going to bear up arms and, go up against these federal agents. All right. It says, for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. And what does sedition mean? A violent uprising. All right. A rebellion. All right. And it's not only going to be, citizens going up against the government. It's going to be citizens against citizens. Because keeping in mind, the main thing that's going to cause this, right now, it's the whole ICE thing. But the main thing that's really going to pop this off is when this economy crashes. All right. When hyperinflation takes place. All right. When a loaf of bread is $50, a gallon of gas is $100 a gallon. All right. That sounds crazy, but no, that's reality of what's coming. Right. When grocery stores are emptied out. OK, when there's no 911 emergency response. All right. When phone lines are down, the internet is off. The power grid goes down, no running water, no electricity. That's when these things are really going to take place. And we're fastly approaching that. OK, so for there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. So these local officials, mayors, governors, presidents, when grocery stores are emptied out. All right. When all these things take place, these people aren't going to care about any type of decree or being law abiding citizens. No, they're going to go to an animalistic survival type mindset. OK, which is why if you're not under the hedge of the Lord, you won't make it out of these times. All right. You literally have to be under the Lord's protection. You have to be of the elect. It says in the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Right. Meaning that they're going to do whatever their flesh tells them to do. Whether it's go invade this house and, kill whoever, rape whoever. That's what they're going to do. It says a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. Yeah. And this will be, somewhat controlled chaos, in the sense that you will have martial law troops surrounding the cities, making sure no one gets out and no one comes in. It says, for because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. Yeah. Jeremiah 30:7. A time like never before. Real quick, before we continue on, Jeremiah 30. And verse 7 reads, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. Let me start above. In verse 5, for thus saith the Lord, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Right, concerning, the time we're coming into, what we were just reading about in 2 Ezra 15. All right, it's not a time of peace. It says, ask ye now and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins as a woman in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. All right, this is the reality of what we're coming into. All right, that's why in 2 Ezra 15 it said, and men shall be afraid. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. So the main target, the main victims, which there is no victims, that's for lack of better words, but the main casualties, of this time we're coming into will be Israelites, descendants of Jacob. All right. And it's all punishment, because the majority of our people have rejected our Lord Yahawashi. They reject the hedge of the Lord. All right. And they support this evil, wicked place and this evil, wicked rulership. So they're going to get caught up in these times. And it says, but he shall be saved out of it. That's talking about the elect, the remnant. All right. That will be saved out of these times. So going back to 2 Ezra 15, verse 19, it reads, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. All right, backing up the point that the main thing that's going to cause, this sedition and complete chaos and violence is when grocery stores are emptied out, right? Famine, the lack of bread, and great tribulation. All right. All of these, neighbors you got, these people who, conduct themselves as civil, law-abiding citizens, they're going to be the most animalistic in that day. Why? Because they have no faith, no hope. All right. You can't trust none of these people. All right. Because they don't fear the Lord. So when shit hits the fan, they going to act on their instincts, on their flesh. All right. Which is what? Violence. That's what is getting ready to go down. All right. And Yahushua prophesied it back in Matthew 24. He said the love of many will wax cold. And we're already starting to see that. So how much more when this society as we know it is completely shut down? All right. So let's get ended off here in Isaiah 19, which is the point. We'll just get straight to this point in verse 2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. All right. The modern day Egyptian is the American citizen. All right. So before this place is destroyed by those missiles, this place is going to erupt in all out hell and chaos, like we just read. And these people are going to be fighting against each other. So-called black people, against so-called white people, so-called Mexicans against so-called white people. This is going to be going down. Republicans versus Democrats, what they call the left wing versus the right. Federal troops and agents and UN troops against militias and citizens. All right. It's going to be a very violent time. And here in America, there's more registered guns than there is citizens. All right. And it makes sense. The average gun owner owns more than one gun. OK. And that's for the purpose of this prophecy, this time that we're coming into, the Egyptians being against the Egyptians. It reads, and they shall fight everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city and kingdom against kingdom. All right. So that's what's coming. Civil war. And it's going to be way worse than that civil war versus the Union and the rebels. Back in the 18. I'm not sure when that war started. I believe it ended in like 1865. All right. This new war, this is going to be way worse. All right. You're going to have people fighting in all fronts. It's going to be chaos. It's not going to be organized. All right. And again, only the elect, will make it out of this time. Lord willing, us believers are of the elect. So I'm going to end it there, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Baharakah, Quadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect. Shalom.